Welcome back. In the last 8 devotions, we've been considering from the book of Genesis how it was God who initiated a communicative relationship with man. 2 days ago, we considered how God pursued this relationship with Abram by calling him when he was 75 years old and promising him that he would give Abram a land and make him a mighty nation. Then in yesterday's devotion, we saw how God came and encouraged Abram 10 years later, assuring Abram that he would keep the promise that he had made. We also saw, though, that Abram listened to Sarai, his wife, and determined that they would help God out, Sarai giving her handmaid, Hagar, to Abram to have a child by. But that wasn't God's plan. God again comes to Abram 13 years later, now 24 years after the initial promise, and comes and initiates the communication once again with Abram, letting him know that it would be according to his plan. We pick up the account in Genesis chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." Then Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you." We drop down to verse 15. Then God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael may live before you." Then God said, "No, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him." Yahweh comes to Abram 24 years after the initial promise, which Abraham, by faith, believed and accepted, and then believed and accepted when he was 85 years old. And we saw that Yahweh then accepted his belief and accounted it to him for righteousness. But then Abraham acts a little bit in not faith, if you would, by agreeing with his wife that they should help God out, in a sense. And yet God in his grace still doesn't set aside Abraham. We read in the New Testament, when we are faithless, he remains faithful. That Yahweh remained faithful to his plan and to his covenant. It was his plan all along that not only would this child be from Abraham, Abram himself specifically, but also to be the product of Abram and Sarai, Abraham and Sarah. And that when God's timing was right, that God would do a miraculous, wonderful thing, and that he would cause she who was barren and unable to give birth any longer, to bring forth a child. And that the child would come from he who was as good as dried up, from Abraham. And Abraham says, would he at the age of 100 and Sarah at the age of 90 give birth to this child? But again, with our God, there is nothing that is too hard for him to do. And he specializes in doing things that man cannot explain away in any other way than it was by the hand of God. God initiated this fellowship with Abram, changing his name to Abraham. Abraham just laughed and marveled at this thing that God had declared. And yet, as we will see in the next couple devotions, God indeed keeps his promise. God intensifies this relationship that he has with Abraham. It is for Abraham only to believe. And Yahweh declares, I will make you exceedingly fruitful. It wasn't for Abraham to make himself exceedingly fruitful. It wasn't for Sarai, who became Sarah, to determine how they could help God to make them exceedingly fruitful. But God will do as God has declared. Do you believe that? God continually comes back to us with his word to remind us, to encourage us, to exhort us to walk by faith, not by our own works of righteousness, not by our own plans, not by our own prowess, but trusting that he who began the good work in us would continue to perform it to the day of Christ. And he then will do that. Believe. Take time today to pray and thank God for the work that he began in you, and that he is continuing in you, and that he shall continue to the day of Christ. And have a blessed day.